This episode contains discussions of domestic violence, self-harm, child neglect, and death. These topics may be distressing for some listeners, and therefore discretion is advised. Please take care of your well-being. Feel free to pause, skip, or return when you're ready. You are now listening to the personal story segment of What Is Your Story podcast. What Is Your Story is a cultural project by Noisy Podcast that is dedicated to telling African stories. Our goal is to create a space where anyone can come and share the truth. Do you have a story to share?
Hi, my name is Glory, and this is my story. So, I grew up in a family of four, the first child, and I had the younger brother, my dad, my mom. My father was a very, how would I put this, a very nightlife, bubbly person. He works in a hotel, so he was always out of the house. I remember that we only saw him a few times in the week. He would come early in the morning, and my mother would like prepare his bath water and stuff, and then he'd be out again before we left for school. My mom was a very churchy, very religious woman, and more than anything, I feel like she believed that whatever you wanted to take care of, you had to take care of it in prayer. Growing up in that family, my father was not, he didn't really care much for church or religion. So it was just the three of us. My mother made me join the choir when I was 5. That's how serious it was, but attending Redeemed Christian Church of God. So at 5, I had already started workers fasting every Sunday, where you come to church very early and you don't eat. But then I started to like do this whole thing where when I came to church, I would sneak out of church, go back home and eat, and then return to church. That is basically how my family was until things began to really change. The relationship between my parents was really interesting. My dad would hit my mom a lot of times. I feel like there was no love between them. And I've confirmed that in the stories that I've heard from like family members, my mom's siblings, because they say, oh, that she's like really loving him. So yes, she would always go after him and stuff. And he was not really feeling it like that, sha. Eventually, she got pregnant. They had to get married because she reported the pregnancy to his family. So it was basically the whole situation of a guy who was just living his life as a guy being roped into marriage. And so I feel like he had so much resentment from all of that. He carried it through. He would not be around. She just was not cut out for that kind of life. That's not it for him. But he stayed anyway. And I remember a lot of times my mom crying in the night and she would say stuff like, oh, it's because of people that I'm still here. That was how it was until eventually she fell sick when I was in primary 5. She had cancer. That was another, I don't have the words for it. It was a lot. The times that she was at home, because most of the time she'd be in the hospital, she was always crying. There was so much pain. Again, my father was never there. And the times that he was there, I and my brother would go to him and be like, she's crying, my mom is crying, you should come, and she just like, go push me alone. So it was horrible being in a home where there's just so much toxicity. It was intense. And then eventually my mom had to stop living in the house with us because it had gotten really bad. So yeah, we had to move out of the house. I and my brother living with my uncle and his wife. We saw my father like once in, I don't know, but he rarely ever came around to see us. And I remember that my auntie would get really angry and she would say stuff like, oh, doesn't he know he has children? A few years after my mom fell sick on this really beautiful Sunday, which happened to be days after her birthday, everybody in the house started to act really weird and we just knew that something had happened. And then the family got together and gathered us and like sat I and my brother down. And they told us, oh, she felt really sick and she couldn't walk and this and that, like prepping us for the news they were about to drop on us. And then they told us, oh, and then she died, which is kind of easier because, to be honest, she was going through so much. It was really heartbreaking because my brother and my mom were tight. Like, I feel like she loved my brother more than she loved me. Maybe because he's a boy. And like, even people have this thing where like boys are like the ultimate children. It's like, oh, he's a boy, you have to take care of him. Plus, like, I've heard that mothers and sons are really tight. My brother was really young, so all of that was kind of awkward. I mean, while you're in somebody's house, like, the only thing that keeps you going is that she's going to get better and we're going to come back together again and just stay in the same house and stuff. And hearing that this is never going to happen. And you're just like, am I going to live in this house forever? So I'm never going to see my mother again. So many emotions at the same time. I feel like the death of my mom made I and my brother so much closer, even till today. Like we're really close because it was like going through that thing at that age is kind of thing that bonds you for life. Kind of, it's like we talk about everything. We had to bury my mom. And of course, my father was there. It's the father, but he's just this guy that there's just so much anger already towards him. But again, that's like the only parent you have, so you cannot show the anger towards him, right? So, but just I think our prayer at the time became, can he take us to live with him? But he really never did that until staying with people became really bad. It became so bad that I had called my mom's family and I was like, if you guys don't come to take me, I'm going to kill myself. And so my mother's brother called my father and was like, I have to take these children. If anything happens to them, blah, blah, blah. Takes us, but then he also take us to his house. He takes us to another family. So we start to stay with another family, but then we don't stay long there because at this point I'm like kind of grown. I just finished secondary school, so I'm like, you have to take us. And so eventually we start to stay with him. I remember this day he calls us and he's like, I'll tell you guys something. And then he says, you have a sister and I want you to meet her. And I just stunned, like, okay, we have a sister. And he's like, oh yeah, she's going to turn one very soon. I want you guys to meet her. And so he brings this really beautiful baby over to the house and she spends the weekend with us and she's like this really cool kid. So we're really excited because I think that I had always wanted a sister because growing up with the boy was kind of chaotic, like all of the fighting and stuff. So I had always wanted to have a sister. Maybe I was really excited about it, more excited than my brother was because my brother was like, I don't want anybody. Don't tell me about any kid, right? And they bring the kid over. You can't fault the kid's not fault. So we bond with this child, and then eventually he's like, "How do you guys to meet her mom?" And we're like, "All right." So he brings the mom over, and she stays in the house for like a week, and so get to know each other properly and stuff. They get married, and you have two more kids, which are like really amazing children, by the way. I bond with my stepmom because she's an amazing person. She's really chill. I feel like she understands a lot of where our pain and anger comes from. As she's the kind of person that my father was. So she's like, oh yeah, I get it that you guys don't really like him like that. At some point in my life, I start to tell myself that I have to forgive my father for being the kind of person that he has been because hearing my mommy's sister say over and over again that this guy wasn't really interested. I'm like, I have started dating people and I know how weird that can be. Like, I don't want anybody to try to rope me into what I don't want to be roped into. So maybe I should forgive him. Maybe we should move past this. And so we kind of start to bond, start to talk to each other about stuff. He had this thing where he would try to rewrite things that have happened. When I say rewrite, I mean somebody tells you a story, like two, three people in the family tells you, oh, this is how this situation happened, this is how this thing was. And then he comes and he tells you a different version of it. But like he had like a really good sweet mouth. So when he said it's like, I sure every other person is not lying against this man. Seems like he's the one who's telling the truth and stuff. But I feel like my brother really saw past his bullshit all the time. Because my brother was always angry at him, like, oh, this man. Again, it was probably because of how much he loved my mother. I still feel like a part of my brother blames my father for my mother's death. Like, maybe if he loved her a little more, she would not have been sick and she wouldn't have died. And so, yeah, all of that anger was there. And sometimes my brother kind of like passed that anger towards my step sibling. Yeah, his kids. You're not my siblings. I don't know you. In trying to bond with my father, my brother moved out of the house. He started to interpret Chinese, so he kind of like just like got jobs that got him out of Lagos State even. He didn't want to have anything to do with my father. He didn't want to come around. My dad would call and he would not pick. I think at some point he blocked my father's number. So that one like was another drama where he was like, this boy is ungrateful, he's this, that, had so much to say about him. Would call extended family members and say, oh, this boy, talk to him. And my brother does not really care. So even if the world is calling, it's like, I don't want to hear. But I have like a really soft heart. So it's just easy for me to be manipulated, in quotes. So yeah, he would say things and I'd be like, yeah, it's fine. I feel like at the peak of our bonding, when at the point where he was telling me so much of the stories that I wanted to hear about, like him and my mom before the marriage, him and my mom after the marriage, some of things that I probably did not understand as a child, probably written anyway, but still, or just his version of those stories. At that point, he died, which is like, you have spent your entire life just like hating this person. And now that you're beginning to love them, they just are not there anymore. He just had a heart attack. when they came back from work. And I remember that when I got my job, because I had a really bad job before and I was struggling. And then, but then I got this job. He was so excited and he was like, oh, yes, we should drink to it and stuff. And so I went, I bought like alcohol for him and I bought for my stepmom. So we're just like drinking, we're happy. And it was like less than a month after that, I went to work, came back. I also was supposed to give him money to fix something in his car, I remember. And I was supposed to give him that money like a few days after the whole thing happened. So it's like, oh, I will give it to you on, say, 2 days later, and then today he just dies. I don't have the words for it because the way it happened, still like a movie. It was so many things happening at the same time. And when we were rushing to the hospital, I was just like, oh, I was following behind. And by the time I got to the hospital, it wasn't there anymore. And I'm like, oh, what's happening? Said, oh, they've moved into another hospital. I'm like, really? Is that what's happening? And then the doctor in the hospital says, oh, can you wait here? Because my stepmom had collapsed by the time I got to the hospital. So they had drips. They had put her on drip. So I had to stay there with my stepmom and then the doctor. And while all of this is happening, they're trying to pretend that nothing happened. Then doctor says, oh, how old was your father? And I'm like, I was, oh my God. Second time this shit has happened to me. I'm just there and I'm like, oh my God. I remember my cousin calling me and saying, I have to man up, which is really weird. You can't cry because they're saying that your stepmom, her BP is really high. If she knows that this has happened, she's probably going to die. And you don't want to be stuck with the kids. And I'm like, okay, still too young. Why would I be stuck with the kids? And so he's like, just put yourself together. As crazy as that day was, I feel like I was not given the opportunity to grieve because like when something like that just happens and just like shifts your life, you're supposed to cry. But then I couldn't because this woman is lying down there by my side and I can't cry because if she finds out that this has happened, she'll probably die. So I had to like hold on and be strong and pretend that, oh, it's fine. So when she wakes up and she's like, oh, what's happening? And I said, oh, they took him to another hospital. It's fine. We'll see in the morning. You just get better. Just be strong. And she's like, okay. But I know that she kind of suspected that something had happened. And so she was always just looking at me like early. And whenever my phone rang, she would look at me like, what's happening? And then doctor will come in. And so I think eventually they gave her like sleeping pills. So I had like luxury of time to talk to people over the phone. And they're like, we'll just be strong. We'll come in the morning and stuff. And then by morning, they didn't let my stepmom leave the hospital. My uncles came to the house. They came to the hospital first to meet us. And then I joined them and went to the house. And apparently they had left my father's body inside his room in the house. So they came like with the mortuary guys and an ambulance because they were like, oh, there's no point keeping him in Lagos. I could just take him to the village straight because I'm going to bury him there. They came with these guys and the embalmer who goes into the room and is embalming and stuff. And I remember because my siblings, they had taken them out of the house. So they spent the night in my neighbor's house. I remember just walking into the room because all of my uncles were in the living room. They're just talking about stuff and it was just the embalmer in the room. And I just walked there. I stood by the door and I was looking at my father. Life is so crazy here because yesterday we were walking around the house and we were talking. And like right now, look at you, we're just lying down there and you can't even move. I had this huge tall guy. I was just there. I was just watching. I could not move, which is just weird. I couldn't move. I remember my auntie's husband, who was in the living room with them, was just like, where's that? And then he ran into the room and grabbed me and he's like, you shouldn't be watching that. And then he pulled me out. I did not cry. I just...
Hi there. Just a reminder, Noisy Podcast is on a mission to publish and promote authentic African stories. If you've got a story to tell, we'd love for you to join us. Simply click the link in the description to sign up. You can also share your stories anonymously and submit through our Google form, where it will be brought to life through narration. Plus, we do group stories, a collective story concept that will feature a small group of people with a similar story. And don't forget to stay with us on social media. On Instagram, we are at whatisyourstory_podcast. And on Twitter, we're at WIYS_podcast. Follow us to stay up to date with all of our activities and upcoming episodes.
Even my cousins called me, I was laughing. Maybe because I called my brother. I remember I called my brother. It happened. I found out. I told him. He was just like, he died. I said yes. I was like, wow. I don't know if he cried because thinking about it now, I don't think I ever asked him. I don't think he cried, to be honest. I feel like he might have been sad, but crying, no. But he could not stay in the house anymore because apparently before they moved him out of the house, he died. So he died in the house. And people, neighbors who carried him to the hospital, where they knew that he had died, and they just like had to go with it for our sakes. So we had to move out of the house, which is chaos upon chaos, because we're thinking about burying this man, and we're also thinking about, oh, we cannot live in this house anymore. We have to move. And all of that fell on me somehow, because, like, oh, being first child, it's like, you have to find a house now for you guys to live in. So we stayed in my uncle's house while I started looking for a house. Again, this is why I say I was not given the chance to grieve. I think at the time I kind of came to realize that grief is different for everybody. Because, like, I saw my stepmom just like, she broke in the way that I have never seen anybody get broken like that ever, because it was just, she could not stand up, she could not do anything. She was just crying and crying and crying. And my siblings, so young to understand, even if everything happened before their eyes, it was just, they're just being kids. I think it was the last child who kept saying, where's my daddy coming back? Did my daddy go to the hospital? My daddy's still in the hospital. And I didn't know what to say, because I'm just like, what do you say to a child who is not even 4? So I was just like, oh, he's coming, don't worry, he's coming. Seeing their mom could not just be there for them. Thank God for my cousins who were there, and they had to like step in somehow, taking care of the kids and stuff, because I still had to go to work. And I think that's one of the ways that I processed my grief. I was going to work. I went to work like literally the next day. Next day after we carried the body to the village. I was like, yes, the second day after the death, I went to work. I remember walking into the office and everybody was like, what are you doing here? You should go home. You can't be here. And I'm like, no, I actually have to be here, because I feel like if I'm not here, I don't know what's going to happen to me. So I just like poured myself into work. And I was really using social media a lot, an unhealthy amount. I don't know why that happened. I remember that once I had judged somebody who lost their mom for posting way too much. I was like, but your mom just died. Why is this person posting so much? And the exact thing happened to me, because when my father died, I was posting way too much. And you would wonder, and now I still don't understand why that happened. I just kept posting on social media. It felt like that was the way that I was kind of avoiding my grief. When I pretend that this did not happen, I'll be fine. I just have to walk, find a house, not think about anything. And so, yes, we went to bury my father. My siblings did not come along. We didn't want them to see that. And I think that right now we regret it, because it felt like we kind of took something from them. They should have, even if we felt they were too young, we should have allowed them see that, because maybe that would have helped them get some form of closure, considering how everything happened. At the time, we had like, I feel like we judged it wrongly, because we're like, oh, they're too young for this. Let them not come along with us. So we traveled, buried my father. And in that period, I and my brother fought a lot. We had a lot of fights. It was insane, because how Igbo people bury their people, they had like lots of lists and stuff. And so when they collected the amount of money, when they calculated how much they needed, they gave everybody a quota. Like, oh, everybody in the family, this is how much you are going to bring and stuff. That's why I paid my part of the money, and my brother did not pay his. He just came along. And I remember that even the coming along was like, we're traveling tomorrow. It's like, oh, I know, I'm coming, don't worry, I'll come. And so he came like, I think he came like the night before we traveled. So when we traveled and buried him, I remember that one of the reasons we kept fighting was that whenever I said, oh, why did you not pay your part of the money? It's like, why should I pay my part of the money? It was not even bought it in the first place. And I'm like, you cannot see that. And it's like, he has siblings, let them bury him. Please, they should leave me alone. And so I felt that mentality, because people would always say, forgive people that are dead, just let it go. And so I'm like, oh, he has died now. Let's just forgive him and let it go. My brother's like, no, we're not letting it go. He was such a shitty father. He was a shitty man. Let's not forget that. So I don't want any parts in this. I'll just be here. I'll be present. That's all. I don't want my money to be part of this and all of that. And so, yes, we fought a lot. And I think even like got people talking, like, my guys always fighting. We couldn't stay in the same room. And that's like the first time that was happening to the both of us. It was really insane. My stepmom was really concerned at some point. Like, I've never seen people like this before. What's happening? And of course, people being all superstitious and stuff, like, are you sure that they're not trying to sow discord between the both of you spiritually and stuff? And I'm like, no, I don't think so. And I also think that the fact that we had, maybe because I was at home and I had gotten to see parts of my father that my brother hadn't. So I was willing to show him grace that my brother was not willing to show him, I guess. And that's why we had different opinions about getting involved in his burial and stuff. And we came back. I had found the house. So moved into the house. I recently started writing about my grief. Before now, I feel like I had always only written fiction because it's just easier to hide in things that aren't true. I write fiction that had like bits and pieces of my life. And I know that I had tried to write non-fiction several times, like essays about myself. And whenever I just like thought about it, I just like, nah, this is just too much for me to put down. And so I stopped. But recently, I think earlier in the year, I began to kind of make sense of grief and losing people with my writing. I wrote about my mom first, and I wrote about her from the perspective of the child who was not religious, because I remember when I was 7 years old, I and my mother had this really crazy fight. So my mother was a morning devotional person, and she had written of her prayers like when we thanked God, we asked for forgiveness, and then we asked for protection for the day. Then we prayed for my father. And prayer for my father was always the same. It was like, you are the potter and he's the clay. Please break him, remold him, shape him. And so it's like every single day, this is what we've prayed for. And I remember that at that time, they had this really big fight that involved like people coming to the house because he came into the house. I don't even know what happened, but like just called her and they started hitting her. And they hit her so much that the neighbors had to come, like they were banging on the door. And I was so little and I was just crying. And my brother was crying. And I remember that wrapper she was putting on just like pulled off. So she was kind of naked and there were people in parlor. And it was just really crazy. And there was this thing before the hitting, there was this thing where we're working together. I think we're going to her shop, and this young girl who's like really hot just walks out and she just shouts my mother's name and then return on the street. And then she's like, "You Abby, don't worry. He's going to push you out of that house and he's going to marry me." And I'm like, "What the hell is this?" And it was just really embarrassing because imagine you're just working with your child and then a young girl just pulls out of nowhere and she's just calling your name and she's just like, that week, a lot of drama happened. She calls us in the morning and she's like, "Oh, let's pray." And then we're praying and she's like, "Oh God, hold him." And I remember just saying, what we was praying this prayer exactly? Like, what's this prayer for? Because this person you're praying about, it's obvious that prayer is not working. And she got really mad. And she was like, "Are you talking to me?" She drove me out of the house. She didn't give me money for food. I had never got to school by myself before then. She didn't give me money for food. She didn't give me lunch. She just like, "Get out of the house." And so I left the house and I remember crying all the way to school. And on the road, I met a neighbor who gave me 15 naira. That's what saved me. But then I think that the first time that I wrote about my mother, that was the first memory that came in. I'm like, why was she the way that she was? So writing has helped me see things from a different perspective. Writing about grief, writing about my parents, the life that they lived, and just like how I fit in and how I do not want to be like that has really helped me process things in a way that before now I hadn't processed at all. Because for both deaths, as different as they were, I didn't cry. It was just really weird. I mean, happening to me when I was young and then again as an older person, it was just, I don't think anybody has, I don't think there's any word that can quantify what you feel when you lose people. It's like there's this deep hole that never really closes. It gets easier to ignore. I think that's the way to put it. It gets easier to ignore. The more time passes, you can ignore it better. It's always there because every Father's Day when I see people on the internet, even if my father was not I see all of that. I cry every Mother's Day. People celebrating their moms or just like random videos on the internet where like parents are being really cool with their kids. I just cry because I'm like, I don't think I even ever had that as a child. And when I was going to have that, the universe just woke up. I was like, "Oh no, you should." And that's really painful. But yeah, I think that's what life is like. I try not to have like the whole victim mentality. Why is you always me? Because everybody is going through it so you and that. Writing about my parents have helped in a lot of ways, and talking about it has also helped. I used to talk to my brother a lot about my mom before my father passed. Like since my father passed, there's like this. I don't really think we have talked about my father as much as we've talked about my mom. Because we just talk about how a lot, like, oh, why did she choose the things that she chose? Why did she choose to stay with him? Why did she even marry him in the first place? And I think talking helps us process a lot of things. With my father, I can only talk about some things with my stepmom, to be fair, because it was kind of hard initially. I think that again, watching her, I saw that everybody experiences grief in like different ways because as the wife, it's just something that you should probably never ever recover from. I mean, I'll never recover from it, but it's not the same degree has it like really messed up because every single time we talk about him, starts to watch goes crazy. And I remember that the pictures of my father that we had enlarged because of the whole Igbo tradition of raising dead person's picture and when you're like doing burial and stuff. My uncle's wife had to seize those pictures because she's like, if people take this picture to your house, this woman looking at these pictures. A lot of times she's like, because I had to move a lot of my father's pictures, I think all of them, from our phones. I had to put them on the drive and like delete them from the phones. After she's like, you say you saved those pictures somewhere. Can I see them? I'm like, no, you can't. I don't go back to look at their pictures. I don't even have pictures of my mother, if I'm being honest. I don't think I have pictures of her. Oh, fuck. Sorry. I don't have pictures of my mother. And I recently wrote a video about how, because it was her birthday on 1st of November. And I woke up that morning and I'm like, trying to picture what she looks like. And like, I had no image in my head, which is really sad because I think one of the things that nothing prepares you for is that you start to forget what they look like. Like, oh, I know this person. Or I didn't even know what their voice sounds like anymore. It was not the era of like phones. So I have like digital pictures or like voice notes or like voice recordings of her. But then my father, yes, I have like a few videos of him. So that is like easier. If I ever forget, like I don't think I would because yeah, I was older when that happened. If I ever forget, I have stuff that remind me of him. But with my mom, nothing. Her sisters have pictures. So maybe when I go to theirs or when it visits me, then I can see pictures. But so yes, grief is really tricky. Sneaks up on you and like the others times, right? You're just like, maybe you're in a supermarket and like you just like getting beef of this perfume and you're like, smells like my father. And I just like, oh my god, he's dead. I try to laugh through everything because it's easier. I read a lot of books that just didn't seem like they're nothing. Like there's this book where the author lost both her parents, but then she jokes about it. And so I just picked that up, like make humor out of it. It's easier to ignore, I guess. And yeah, I don't want to be crushed by the weight of it. So it's easier to just like laugh about it and move on. Thank you for listening to my story.
That is it for today's episode of What Is Your Story? Thank you so much for listening and for being a part of our community of storytellers. I'll be back next week with another story to share. And until then, remember to keep telling your truth.